The wind screamed across the open plain, pelting the earth with hailstones the size of marbles as Tabitha Calloway stumbled blindly forward, her hands clutching the thin shawl around her shoulders. Blood trickled down her temple, mixing with the rain that soaked her dress, weighing her down with every desperate step away from the Randall homestead, a place she had foolishly believed might become a sanctuary. It was 1876, late autumn in Arizona Territory, and Tabitha had never felt more alone. At 22, she had traveled from Boston to serve as governess to the Randall children, only to discover that Mrs. Randall harbored deep jealousy toward any young woman in her husband's vicinity. After weeks of escalating tension, it had all come to a violent head tonight when Mrs. Randall had accused her of impropriety with Mr. Randall, an absolutely false claim. The woman had flown into a rage, striking Tabitha across the face before ordering her husband to get rid of the harlot. Mr. Randall, weak-willed and fearful of his wife, had dragged Tabitha to the edge of their property and shoved her out into the brewing storm with nothing but the clothes on her back and a warning never to return. The hailstorm intensified. Tabitha raised her arms to shield her head as the frozen projectiles pelted her mercilessly. Her thin-soled shoes slipped in the mud, sending her crashing to the ground. Pain shot through her ankle as she tried to stand again. The vast, unforgiving landscape of the Arizona Territory stretched out before her, no shelter in sight. The nearest town, Chloride, was at least 5 miles away. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the rugged terrain for a split second. In that brief flash, Tabitha spotted what appeared to be an outcropping of rocks in the distance. With renewed determination, she forced herself forward, limping painfully through the storm. The hail struck her shoulders and back, each impact adding to the collection of bruises already forming. Her vision blurred as exhaustion and pain threatened to overcome her. Just as her legs began to give way beneath her, the sound of hoofbeats penetrated the howl of the wind. A dark figure on horseback emerged from the curtain of hail, the animal's flanks glistening with moisture as it approached. Tabitha couldn't tell if this was salvation or further danger, but she had no strength left to run. "Madam," a deep voice called out. "What in tarnation are you doing out in this?" Tabitha tried to respond, but her voice caught in her throat. The last of her strength deserted her, and she collapsed into the mud, consciousness fading as the stranger dismounted and hurried to her side. "Good Lord," the man muttered, kneeling beside her. Through the haze of near unconsciousness, she felt gentle hands carefully turning her over. "You're all bruised up. Don't worry, madam. I've got you." The last thing Tabitha registered was being lifted in strong arms and the sensation of leaving the ground as the stranger placed her on his horse. Then darkness claimed her entirely. When Tabitha regained consciousness, the first thing she noticed was warmth. After the biting cold of the storm, the sensation was so foreign that for a moment she wondered if she had died. Her eyes fluttered open to reveal a rough-hewn wooden ceiling above her. She lay on a bed, not a fine one like at the Randalls, but comfortable enough, covered with several heavy blankets. The scent of coffee and something savory filled the air. A fire crackled in a stone hearth across the small room. Tabitha tried to sit up but winced as pain flared through her body, drawing an involuntary gasp from her lips. "Easy there," came a voice from the corner of the room. "You took quite a beating from that hailstorm." Tabitha turned her head to see a man rising from a chair by the fire. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a neatly trimmed beard that framed a face weathered by sun and wind. He appeared to be in his early 30s, dressed in a simple flannel shirt and worn denim pants, a cowboy by the look of him. "Where am I?" Tabitha managed, her voice raspy. The man approached, carrying a cup of water which he offered to her. "My ranch, about 3 miles outside of Chloride. Name's Gabriel Owens. Most folks call me Gabe." Tabitha accepted the water gratefully, taking small sips that soothed her parched throat. "Tabitha Calloway," she introduced herself when she could speak again. "Thank you for saving me, Mr. Owens." "Gabe," he corrected with a gentle smile. "And you're welcome, Miss Calloway, though I'm mighty curious what a lady like yourself was doing wandering in a hailstorm. You're not from around here, that's plain enough." His eyes were kind but searching, a deep brown that reminded Tabitha of polished mahogany. She found herself wanting to trust him, yet caution born of recent experience made her hesitate. "I was employed as a governess at the Randall place," she said carefully. "There was a misunderstanding. Mrs. Randall asked me to leave." Gabe's expression darkened. "In the middle of a hailstorm. That's not a misunderstanding, Miss Calloway. That's cruelty." Tabitha looked down at her hands, noticing that someone, presumably Gabe, had cleaned the mud from them and bandaged a cut on her palm she hadn't even noticed receiving. "You've been out for nearly a day," Gabe continued, moving back to the fireplace where a pot hung over the flames. "I was starting to worry. You're bruised all over and that ankle of yours is swollen something fierce. I don't think it's broken, but you won't be walking far for a while. A day." Tabitha felt a wave of panic. "I need to get to town. I have no position now, no place to stay." "I need to find work." "Whoa there," Gabe interrupted, ladling what appeared to be stew into a bowl. "You're not going anywhere until you're healed up proper. Chloride isn't going anywhere, and neither are you for the time being." He brought the bowl to her bedside. "First things first. You need to eat and rest. Everything else can wait." The aroma of the stew made Tabitha's stomach growl loudly, reminding her that she hadn't eaten since breakfast the previous day. She accepted the bowl with murmured thanks, suddenly too hungry to argue. Gabe watched her eat for a moment before speaking again. "I've got a spare room, this one, obviously, and plenty of food. You're welcome to stay until you're back on your feet. Then I'll help you find whatever it is you're looking for in Chloride." Tabitha paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. "That's very generous, but I couldn't impose. It's not imposing when it's offered freely," Gabe said simply. "Besides, my mother would turn in her grave if I turned an injured woman out into the world." Something in his tone told Tabitha that arguing would be futile. And truthfully, she had nowhere else to go. Her savings were pitiful and she didn't know a soul in the territory. "Thank you," she said finally. "I won't stay any longer than necessary." Gabe nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good, now finish that stew. Dr. Wilson from town came by yesterday to check on you. He's an old friend. Said you need plenty of nourishment to recover." As Tabitha ate, Gabe moved around the small cabin, tending to various tasks with an efficiency that suggested long practice. The cabin was modest but well kept, consisting of what appeared to be 2 rooms, the main living area where she currently lay, and another room visible through a partially open door. "You live here alone?" Tabitha asked, curiosity getting the better of her. "Just me and my dog, Rusty," Gabe replied. "He's out checking the cattle with my ranch hand, Miguel. They'll be back by sundown." "You have a cattle ranch," Gabe nodded. "Not the biggest spread in the territory, but it's mine. Been building it up for 7 years now." There was unmistakable pride in his voice. "What about you? What brought you all the way from?" He studied her for a moment. "Boston." "New York, Boston," Tabitha confirmed, impressed by his perception. "My parents died of influenza last year. Father was a professor at Harvard, but his illness depleted our savings. I took governess positions to support myself." She hadn't meant to share so much, but something about Gabe's straightforward manner invited honesty. "And that path led you to the Randalls," Gabe said, his expression unreadable. Well, perhaps that particular trail wasn't the right one, but Arizona territory has plenty of opportunities for someone with education. Tabitha finished her stew, feeling strength returning to her limbs even as weariness tugged at her consciousness. Gabe took the empty bowl and placed a gentle hand on her forehead. "No fever, that's good. You should rest more. When you wake, we can talk about what comes next." Though she wanted to protest that she'd already slept for a day, Tabitha found her eyelids growing heavy. The last thing she saw before drifting off was Gabe adjusting the blankets around her, his movements careful and considerate. The next few days passed in a rhythm of rest and recovery. Tabitha's bruises began to fade from angry purple to sickly yellow, and the swelling in her ankle reduced enough that she could put weight on it, albeit gingerly. Gabe proved to be an attentive but unobtrusive host, providing her with everything she needed while giving her space to heal. On the fourth day, Tabitha awoke early, determined to be more than an invalid. The cabin was quiet, suggesting Gabe had already gone out to tend to his ranch work. She dressed carefully in the clothes Gabe had provided, a simple dress that had belonged to his late mother. He'd explained with some awkwardness, kept in a trunk and never worn. It was slightly large on her slender frame, but clean and serviceable. Using the wall for support, Tabitha made her way to the main area of the cabin. She found it empty but tidy, with a pot of coffee still warm on the stove. Through the window, she could see Gabe in the distance, working with a young colt in a small corral. His movements were patient and gentle, despite his imposing stature. Tabitha poured herself coffee and, feeling useful for the first time in days, began preparing a simple breakfast from the supplies in Gabe's pantry. By the time he returned to the cabin, she had eggs and bacon cooking and bread sliced. Gabe stopped short in the doorway, surprise evident on his face. "You shouldn't be up," he said, though the protest lacked conviction as his eyes took in the breakfast preparations. "I'm feeling much better," Tabitha replied, trying not to wince as she shifted weight onto her injured ankle. "And I can't continue to accept your hospitality without contributing something in return." A smile tugged at the corner of Gabe's mouth as he removed his hat and hung it on a peg by the door. "Fair enough, but don't push yourself too hard." They ate breakfast together, and Tabitha found herself enjoying the simple domesticity of the moment. Gabe was easy to talk to, lacking the pretension of the Boston men she had known and the crude manners of Mr. Randall. He spoke intelligently about his ranch, the town of Chloride, and the challenges and rewards of life in the territory. "Town's growing," he told her between bites of egg. "The silver mines bring in new folks regular. There's a school now, though no permanent teacher. They've been making do with Mrs. Henderson, the preacher's wife, but she's expecting her fourth child and won't be able to continue much longer." Tabitha perked up at this information. "A school?" "Without a teacher," Gabe nodded, studying her with that perceptive gaze. "You thinking of applying for the position?" "I am qualified," Tabitha said thoughtfully. "I have experience teaching children of various ages." "I don't doubt it," Gabe replied. "Town council would be lucky to have someone with your education. I could take you in to meet them when you're ready." "I would appreciate that very much," Tabitha said, warmth spreading through her at his apparent confidence in her abilities. After breakfast, despite Gabe's protests, Tabitha insisted on washing the dishes. He finally relented but stayed nearby, drying each item as she finished washing it. "I need to check the north pasture today," he told her. "One of the fences was damaged in the storm." "Will you be all right here alone for a few hours?" "Of course," Tabitha assured him. "I'm not completely helpless, you know," Gabe chuckled. "I never thought you were. Not for a minute. Anyone who survives what you did has plenty of grit." He hesitated, then added more seriously, I've been meaning to ask. The bruise on your face when I found you, it didn't look like it came from hail." Tabitha's hand instinctively went to her cheek, where the mark of Mrs. Randall's ring had mostly faded. She had hoped Gabe hadn't noticed. "Mrs. Randall has a volatile temperament," she said carefully. Gabe's jaw tightened. "She struck you." It wasn't a question, but Tabitha nodded anyway. "She accused me of impropriety with her husband. It was entirely false, but she wouldn't listen to reason." "And then they threw you out in a hailstorm," Gabe said, his voice low and controlled, though Tabitha could sense the anger beneath it. "The Randalls have always had a reputation for being difficult employers, but this—" He shook his head. "This crosses a line." "It's in the past now," Tabitha said, uncomfortable with his concern. "I just need to focus on what comes next." Gabe studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, and I aim to help with that if you'll let me." After he left for the north pasture, Tabitha spent the morning exploring the cabin more thoroughly. It was a solidly built structure with 2 main rooms, the living area with its stone hearth, small kitchen space, and the bed where she had been sleeping, and Gabe's bedroom, which she respectfully did not enter. There was also a small lean-to attached to the back that served as a storeroom. The interior was utilitarian, but not without character. Bookshelves held a surprising variety of volumes, from practical guides on cattle breeding to novels by Dickens, and even a collection of Shakespeare. On the mantel stood a daguerreotype of a handsome couple, Gabe's parents, she assumed, and beside it, a smaller image of a young Gabe with an older boy who bore a strong resemblance to him. Near midday, Tabitha heard barking outside. Looking through the window, she saw a large copper-colored dog bounding toward the cabin. This must be Rusty, she realized, just as the animal reached the porch and began scratching at the door. When she opened it, Rusty froze, clearly expecting Gabe and not a strange woman. The dog's ears perked up and he tilted his head in confusion. "Hello, Rusty," Tabitha said gently, extending her hand for the dog to sniff. "I'm Tabitha. Your master has been kind enough to let me stay for a while." Rusty approached cautiously, sniffed her hand, then apparently decided she was acceptable. His tail began to wag, and he pushed his head under her palm, clearly requesting pets. Tabitha laughed and obliged, scratching behind his ears. "You're a friendly fellow, aren't you?" she murmured, and Rusty responded by flopping onto his back, exposing his belly for scratches. "Oh, I see how it is. You're quite the charmer." She was still petting the dog when hoofbeats announced another arrival. A man on horseback approached, not Gabe, but a slender Mexican man perhaps a few years younger than Gabe. "Hello," he called, dismounting with fluid grace. "You must be Miss Calloway. Gabe told me about you. I am Miguel Vega, ranch hand, and if you ask Gabe, a general nuisance." His eyes twinkled with good humor. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Vega," Tabitha replied. "And it's just Tabitha, please." "Miguel, then," he responded with a slight bow. "I came to check on you as Gabe asked, and to bring these." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle wrapped in brown paper. "Mrs. Diaz from town sent these clothes. She is close to your size," Gabe thought. Tabitha accepted the bundle with surprise and gratitude. "That's very kind. Please thank her for me when you next see her." "You can thank her yourself," Miguel said with a smile. "She is eager to meet you. The whole town is curious about the Eastern lady staying at Gabe's ranch." He said this without malice, merely stating a fact. "I'm afraid they'll be disappointed to find I'm quite ordinary," Tabitha replied. Miguel laughed. "In chloride, a lady from Boston with education is far from ordinary, señorita." He tipped his hat. "I must return to help Gabe, but it was a pleasure to meet you. Rusty will keep you company." After Miguel left, Tabitha unwrapped the bundle to find two simple but well-made dresses, a shawl, and various necessities a woman might need. The thoughtfulness of the gift from a stranger brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Perhaps there was a place for her in this rugged territory after all. The rest of the day passed quietly. Tabitha explored the immediate surroundings of the cabin, careful not to stray far with her injured ankle. Rusty stayed by her side, occasionally running off to investigate something but always returning promptly. The ranch was nestled in a valley with mountains visible in the distance. The landscape, both harsh and beautiful in a way that was entirely different from the manicured gardens and crowded streets of Boston. By the time Gabe returned in the late afternoon, Tabitha had prepared a simple stew using ingredients she found in his pantry. The domesticity of the scene, Tabitha at the stove, Rusty lounging by the fire, caused Gabe to pause in the doorway, an unreadable expression crossing his face. "You didn't need to cook," he said finally, removing his hat and gloves. "I wanted to," Tabitha replied. "It feels good to be useful." They ate together, and Gabe told her about the fence repair and the state of his herd after the storm. Tabitha found herself genuinely interested in the daily workings of the ranch. There was something refreshingly honest about the life Gabe had built here. "Miguel mentioned the whole town knows about me," Tabitha said as they finished eating. Gabe looked slightly embarrassed. "News travels fast in a small place like Chloride. I had to explain to Doc Wilson why I needed him to come out here, and well," he shrugged, "people talk. Will it cause problems? A single woman staying with you?" Gabe considered this. "Some might gossip, but most folks around here are practical. They understand I couldn't leave you out in that storm, and they know I'm not the type to take advantage." He met her eyes directly. "But if you're concerned about your reputation, I can take you into town tomorrow. The boarding house is respectable, run by a widow named Mrs. Fletcher." Tabitha weighed her options. The practical thing would be to move to town immediately, yet the thought of leaving the safety and comfort of Gabe's cabin was surprisingly difficult. "Perhaps a visit to town first," she suggested. "I'd like to inquire about the teaching position if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all," Gabe assured her. "I need to pick up supplies anyway." As they cleaned up after dinner, working together in comfortable silence, Tabitha found herself studying Gabe surreptitiously. In just a few days, this stranger had become someone she trusted implicitly. There was a quiet strength about him that had nothing to do with his physical presence, and everything to do with his character. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the Arizona wilderness, Tabitha realized that for the first time since her parents' deaths, she didn't feel completely alone in the world. Morning dawned clear and cool, a welcome change from the stormy weather that had marked Tabitha's arrival. Gabe had mentioned they would leave for town after breakfast, so she dressed carefully in one of the dresses. Mrs. Diaz had sent a simple blue calico that fit her surprisingly well. When she emerged from the bedroom, Gabe was already up, frying bacon and brewing coffee. He turned at her entrance, and something in his expression made her suddenly conscious of her appearance. "The blue suits you," he said simply, before turning back to the stove. Tabitha felt a flush of warmth at the compliment. "Thank you, and thank you for arranging the clothes. It was very thoughtful." Breakfast was a quick affair, and soon they were in Gabe's wagon heading toward Chloride. Tabitha's ankle was much improved, but the jolting of the wagon over the rough terrain still caused occasional twinges of pain. She tried not to let it show, but Gabe noticed her discomfort and slowed the horses. "Sorry about the road," he said. "Not much more than a trail in places." "It's fine," Tabitha assured him. "I'm just grateful for the opportunity to see more of the territory," and there was indeed much to see. The landscape opened up before them, vast and dramatic. Mountains rose in the distance, their slopes dotted with pine and juniper. Closer at hand, the desert flora fascinated Tabitha with its alien beauty cacti in various shapes and sizes. Yucca plants with their dramatic flower stalks, and occasional bursts of wildflowers, adding splashes of color to the predominantly brown and green palette. "It's beautiful," she murmured, almost to herself. "So different from New England." "Takes some getting used to," Gabe acknowledged. "When I first came out here, I thought it was the most God-forsaken place I'd ever seen. Now I can't imagine living anywhere else." "What brought you here?" Tabitha asked, realizing she knew very little about Gabe's past. Gabe was silent for a moment, his eyes fixed on the trail ahead. "War," he said finally. "I fought for the Union. Afterward, home didn't feel like home anymore. Too many memories, too many ghosts. Came west with my brother Jack. He's the one in the picture with me on the mantle." Tabitha nodded, encouraging him to continue. "We planned to start a ranch together, but Jack got gold fever and headed to California in '70. I stayed, built the ranch." There was more to the story, Tabitha sensed, but Gabe didn't elaborate and she didn't press. "You hear from him?" "Your brother," Gabe shook his head. "Not in years. Last letter came from San Francisco. He was heading north to try his luck in new territory." A shadow passed over his face. "That's the way of it out here sometimes. People move on, lose touch." They rode in companionable silence for a while, until the first buildings of Chloride came into view. It was a small settlement, certainly not the bustling metropolis Tabitha was accustomed to, but larger than she had expected. A main street ran through the center of town, lined with various businesses, a general store, a saloon, what appeared to be a bank, and several other establishments. "Silver mining town," Gabe explained as they approached. "Founded in '62. Has its ups and downs with the mines, but it's been stable the last few years." People on the street turned to watch as Gabe's wagon rolled into town. Many called out greetings, which Gabe returned with nods or raised hand. It was clear he was well known and respected. "Where to first?" he asked Tabitha. "The school, I think," she replied, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. "If that's convenient." Gabe nodded and guided the wagon toward a small building at the end of the main street. It was a simple structure, recently built by the look of it, with a bell mounted on the roof. As they pulled up in front of the school, the door opened, and a plump, pleasant-faced woman emerged, clearly curious about the visitors. She appeared to be in her late 40s, with graying brown hair tucked neatly under a cap. "Gabe Owens," she called, smiling broadly. "What brings you to town on a Tuesday?" Gabe tipped his hat respectfully. "Mrs. Henderson. I've brought someone I think you'll want to meet." He jumped down from the wagon and came around to help Tabitha descend, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Tabitha smoothed her dress nervously as Gabe made the introductions. "Mrs. Henderson, this is Miss Tabitha Calloway, recently of Boston. She's a trained governess with teaching experience. Miss Calloway, Mrs. Eliza Henderson, who's been keeping our school running these past months." Mrs. Henderson's eyes lit up with undisguised interest. "A trained teacher, from Boston. Oh, my dear, you are most welcome in Chloride." She stepped forward and clasped Tabitha's hands warmly. "You must come in at once. The children are at their arithmetic, but they would be delighted to meet you." Before Tabitha could respond, Mrs. Henderson was ushering her toward the schoolhouse, chattering excitedly. "We have 23 students currently, ages 6 to 15. A challenging range, to be sure, but they're good children for the most part. The town council has been searching for a proper teacher since Mr. Peterson left last spring." Tabitha glanced back at Gabe, who gave her an encouraging nod. "I'll be at the general store when you're finished," he called. Take your time." The next hour passed in a whirlwind as Tabitha met the students, observed Mrs. Henderson's teaching methods, and even conducted a brief reading lesson at the older woman's insistence. The children were indeed a diverse group, from the youngest, a shy 6-year-old named Abigail, to the oldest, a 15-year-old boy named Thomas who clearly thought himself too grown for school but participated nonetheless. "You're a natural, Mrs. Henderson declared when the children were released for their midday break. "I can tell you have genuine affection for the young ones, and they responded to you beautifully." "Thank you," Tabitha replied, warmed by the praise. "They seem like wonderful children, Mrs. Henderson nodded, her expression turning serious. "Miss Calloway, I won't mince words. I need to step away from teaching very soon." She placed a hand on her slightly rounded belly. "This little one is making it difficult to stand all day, and my husband insists I rest more. The town needs you if you're willing." The directness of the offer took Tabitha by surprise. I would need to speak with the town council, surely." "Formalities," Mrs. Henderson said with a dismissive wave. "They'll approve my recommendation without question. The position pays $30 a month, plus room and board at the boarding house." She paused, studying Tabitha carefully. "I understand you've been staying at Gabe Owens's ranch." There was no judgment in her tone, but Tabitha felt a need to explain nonetheless. "Mr. Owens rescued me during the hailstorm last week. I was injured and he kindly offered shelter while I recovered." Mrs. Henderson nodded. "Gabe is a good man, one of the best in these parts. Not surprising he'd help someone in need." She smiled knowingly. "Though I can't recall him ever bringing a young lady to town before." Before Tabitha could formulate a response to this observation, the schoolhouse door opened, and a distinguished-looking man with silver-streaked hair entered. "Ah, Mr. Mayor," Mrs. Henderson called. "Perfect timing. May I present Miss Tabitha Calloway, our potential new teacher?" The next hours were a blur of introductions and conversations as Tabitha met various town officials and prominent citizens, all seemingly appearing out of nowhere once word spread of her presence. By the time she finally made her way to the general store to find Gabe, she was both exhausted and exhilarated. Gabe was loading supplies into the wagon, but stopped immediately when he saw her approach. "How did it go?" he asked, his expression genuinely interested. "I appear to have been hired," Tabitha replied, still somewhat bemused by the speed of events. "The town council will make it official at their meeting tomorrow, but Mrs. Henderson was quite insistent it's a mere formality." A broad smile broke across Gabe's face. "That's wonderful news, Tabitha." "Congratulations." It was the first time he had used her given name, and Tabitha found she liked the sound of it in his deep voice. "Mrs. Fletcher has a room ready at the boarding house whenever I wish to move in," she continued. "The town is being remarkably accommodating." "They need a teacher badly," Gabe said, securing the last of his purchases. "And qualified ones aren't exactly common in these parts." He hesitated, then added, "So you'll be staying in Chloride then?" There was something in his tone Tabitha couldn't quite identify. Disappointment? Concern? "It seems the sensible choice," she replied carefully. "Though I admit the thought of leaving your ranch is—" She trailed off, unsure how to express the complex emotions she was feeling. Gabe nodded, his expression unreadable. "You're welcome to stay until you're fully recovered. No rush." They completed their business in town, which included a visit to the dressmaker for additional clothes for Tabitha, paid for with an advance on her teacher's salary. Throughout the afternoon, Tabitha was introduced to more townspeople than she could possibly remember, all of whom welcomed her warmly. By the time they headed back to the ranch, the sun was beginning its descent toward the western horizon. Tabitha found herself strangely reluctant for the day to end. There was comfort in Gabe's quiet presence beside her on the wagon seat, a sense of safety she hadn't expected to find in this wild territory. "Thank you for today," she said as the ranch came into view. "For everything, really. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found me in that storm." Gabe glanced at her, his expression softening. "No thanks needed. Anyone would have done the same." "No," Tabitha said with certainty. "Not anyone, not like you did." Something passed between them in that moment, an unspoken understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of something neither was ready to name. Then Rusty came bounding out to meet the wagon, breaking the moment with his enthusiastic greeting. The next week passed in a pattern of healing and preparation. Tabitha's ankle improved to the point where she barely limped, and the bruises from her ordeal faded entirely. Each day, she grew more comfortable at the ranch, falling into an easy routine with Gabe. She cooked meals, he tended to ranch work, and in the evenings they often sat by the fire, talking or sometimes just enjoying comfortable silence. Gabe taught her about the ranch, the cycles of cattle raising, the challenges of the harsh environment, the satisfaction of creating something sustainable from the unforgiving land. Tabitha found herself fascinated by it all, and by the man who spoke of his work with such quiet passion. For his part, Gabe seemed genuinely interested in her stories of Boston, her education, and her experiences as a governess. He was well-read despite his frontier lifestyle, and their conversations often turned to books they had both enjoyed. It was during one such evening, as they discussed a volume of Thoreau, that Tabitha realized with sudden clarity that she was falling in love with Gabriel Owens. The realization both thrilled and terrified her. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Gabe asked, noticing her sudden silence. Tabitha shook her head, unable to voice the truth. "Just thinking about tomorrow. I should really move to town soon. School begins next Monday." Gabe's expression flickered with something like disappointment before he nodded. "Of course. I can take you in tomorrow if you'd like." "Thank you," Tabitha said, trying to ignore the ache in her chest at the thought of leaving the ranch, of leaving him. That night, sleep eluded her. She lay awake, listening to the night sounds of the ranch and contemplating her future. Teaching in Chloride was a good opportunity, a chance to build a new life. Yet the thought of not seeing Gabe each day left an emptiness she hadn't anticipated. Morning arrived with a sense of finality. Tabitha packed her few belongings, the clothes provided by Mrs. Diaz and purchased in town, a hairbrush Gabe had procured for her, and the book of poetry he had lent her from his small collection. Breakfast was a quiet affair, the usual easy conversation replaced by a tension neither seemed willing to address. Finally, as they prepared to leave for town, Gabe broke the silence. "You'll do well in Chloride," he said, his tone encouraging despite the tightness around his eyes. "The children are lucky to have you as their teacher." "Thank you," Tabitha replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "I'm grateful for the opportunity." The journey to town seemed shorter than before, or perhaps Tabitha was simply dreading its conclusion. As they approached the boarding house, a two-story structure painted a cheerful yellow, she found herself searching for reasons to delay her departure. Mrs. Fletcher, a robust widow in her 60s with a no-nonsense manner, greeted them warmly. "Miss Calloway, we've been expecting you. Your room is all ready, dear." Tabitha thanked her, then turned to Gabe, who was unloading her small collection of belongings from the wagon. Their eyes met, and for a moment neither spoke. "Well," Gabe said finally, handing her the last bundle, "I suppose this is it." "Yes," Tabitha agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you again for everything." Gabe nodded, his jaw tight. "You're always welcome at the ranch. If you need anything at all, you send word." "I will," Tabitha promised. There was so much more she wanted to say, but Mrs. Fletcher was watching with undisguised curiosity, and other townsfolk were passing by, offering greetings and welcome. The moment for honesty passed, and Gabe tipped his hat, climbed back onto the wagon, and with a final nod, drove away. Tabitha watched until the wagon disappeared around a bend in the road, then allowed Mrs. Fletcher to usher her inside to begin her new life in Chloride. The first weeks of teaching were both challenging and rewarding. The children, while initially wary of their new teacher from the East, quickly warmed to Tabitha's engaging teaching style and genuine interest in their progress. The townspeople were welcoming, and Tabitha found herself invited to Sunday dinners, social gatherings, and various community events. Yet despite the warm reception and the satisfaction of her work, Tabitha felt an emptiness she couldn't quite name, or perhaps wouldn't allow herself to name. She hadn't seen Gabe since he'd left her at the boarding house, though she'd heard news of him through town gossip. His cattle were doing well. He'd purchased new breeding stock. He declined yet another invitation to the Hendersons' social gathering. 6 weeks into her tenure as teacher, Tabitha was grading arithmetic papers in her small but comfortable room at the boarding house when a knock came at her door. She opened it to find Mrs. Fletcher, her usually composed face alight with excitement. "You have a visitor, Miss Calloway," the older woman announced. "Mr. Owens is waiting in the parlor." Tabitha's heart jumped, and she had to consciously steady herself. "Thank you, Mrs. Fletcher. I'll be right down." After a quick check of her appearance in the small mirror, smoothing her hair and straightening her collar, Tabitha descended to the parlor, where Gabe stood with his hat in his hands, looking uncharacteristically uncertain. He turned at her entrance, and the look in his eyes made her breath catch. He seemed both relieved and nervous to see her. "Miss Calloway," he said formally, aware of Mrs. Fletcher hovering nearby. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening." "Not at all, Mr. Owens," Tabitha replied with equal formality. "It's good to see you, Mrs. Fletcher," after making a show of adjusting the curtains, finally took the hint and left them alone, though Tabitha had no doubt the woman would be listening from just outside the door. Once they were relatively private, Gabe's posture relaxed slightly. "You look well," he said, his voice warmer. "Teaching agrees with you." "It does," Tabitha acknowledged. "The children are wonderful and the town has been very welcoming." She hesitated, then added softly, "I've missed the ranch, though, and Rusty." Gabe's lips quirked in a half-smile. "Rusty's missed you, too. Keeps looking for you around the cabin." He paused, then added more quietly, "He's not the only one." The admission, simple as it was, sent a flutter through Tabitha's chest. "I've missed you as well," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabe took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "That's why I'm here, actually. I was wondering if you might like to come out to the ranch this Saturday, for dinner." He spoke the invitation in a rush, as if afraid he might lose his nerve. I thought we might talk." Without half the town watching, Tabitha couldn't help the smile that spread across her face. "I'd like that very much." Relief washed over Gabe's features. "Good, that's good. I'll come for you around noon if that suits." "It's perfect," Tabitha assured him. They stood in awkward silence for a moment, both aware of the undercurrents beneath this seemingly simple invitation, before Gabe cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to your work. I just wanted to see you." "I'm glad you did," Tabitha said softly. Gabe nodded, placed his hat back on his head, and with a final lingering look took his leave. As soon as the front door closed behind him, Mrs. Fletcher reappeared as if by magic. Well, the older woman said, her eyes twinkling. "Quite an unexpected visit, wouldn't you say?" Tabitha felt a blush creeping up her cheeks. "Mr. Owens is a friend. He saved my life, as you know." "MMM," Mrs. Fletcher hummed, unconvinced. "And friends often look at each other the way that man was looking at you." Unable to formulate a suitable response, Tabitha excused herself and retreated to her room, where she found it impossible to concentrate on her grading. Her mind kept returning to the look in Gabe's eyes, the tentative hope in his invitation, and the possibilities of what Saturday might bring. The rest of the week crawled by with agonizing slowness. Tabitha threw herself into her teaching, but her thoughts continually drifted to the upcoming visit to the ranch. By Friday, her students were giving her curious looks as she repeated herself, or lost track of lessons mid-explanation. "Miss Calloway, are you feeling well?" asked 10-year-old Sarah Miller after Tabitha had accidentally assigned the same reading passage twice. "Perfectly well, thank you, Sarah," Tabitha replied, fighting a blush. "Just a bit distracted today." "Is it because Mr. Owens is coming to take you to his ranch tomorrow?" the girl asked innocently. Tabitha stared at her, momentarily speechless. "How did you?" Sarah shrugged. "My ma told me. She said Mrs. Fletcher told her." "Ma says Mr. Owens must be sweet on you because he never invites ladies to his ranch." The other children were now listening with undisguised interest, and Tabitha realized she needed to regain control of the classroom quickly. "That's quite enough, Sarah. Mr. Owens and I are friends, and my personal affairs are not a suitable topic for classroom discussion." She clapped her hands briskly. "Now, everyone take out your geography readers. We'll be learning about the Mississippi River today." The incident was a stark reminder of how quickly information traveled in a small town like Chloride. By the time Saturday arrived, Tabitha was certain every resident knew of her planned visit to the Owens Ranch. When Gabe arrived promptly at noon, Tabitha was waiting, dressed in her best day dress, a deep green that complemented her auburn hair. She had spent more time than usual on her appearance, arranging her hair in a style that was both neat and flattering, and even adding a touch of the rose-scented perfume Mrs. Diaz had gifted her. Gabe's appreciative glance as she descended the boarding house steps told her the effort had not been wasted. He looked different too, freshly shaven, his usually unruly dark hair neatly combed, wearing a clean shirt and his best denim pants. "You look beautiful," he said simply as he helped her into the wagon. "Thank you," Tabitha replied, trying to ignore Mrs. Fletcher watching from the window. "You look very handsome yourself." The ride to the ranch was filled with easier conversation than their last journey together. Gabe asked about her teaching, and Tabitha shared amusing anecdotes about her students. In turn, she inquired about the ranch, and he told her about the new calves born since she'd left and the improvements he was making to the corral. As they approached the ranch, Tabitha felt a surprising sense of homecoming. The modest cabin, the corral, the surrounding landscape, in the short time she had spent here, it had become a place of safety and comfort in her mind. Rusty came bounding out to meet them, barking joyfully when he recognized Tabitha. As soon as Gabe helped her down from the wagon, the dog was circling her legs, his entire body wiggling with excitement. "I told you he missed you," Gabe said, smiling at the dog's enthusiasm. "And I missed him," Tabitha replied, kneeling to scratch behind Rusty's ears despite the risk to her dress. The cabin was noticeably tidier than usual, Tabitha observed as they entered. Fresh wildflowers stood in a jar on the table, and something delicious was simmering on the stove. "You've been busy," she noted, touched by the evident preparation. "Miguel helped," Gabe admitted with a slight smile. "He said the place needed a woman's touch, but since that wasn't available, he'd have to do." Tabitha laughed. "Well, he did an admirable job. It looks lovely." They shared a meal that Gabe had clearly put considerable effort into, preparing venison stew with biscuits and wild berries for dessert. The conversation flowed easily, but Tabitha could sense an underlying tension, as if both were circling around something neither was quite ready to address directly. After the meal, Gabe suggested a short walk to see the new additions to the ranch. The afternoon was pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of sage and juniper. As they walked, Rusty running ahead and occasionally doubling back to check on them, Tabitha found herself stealing glances at Gabe, admiring his strong profile against the backdrop of the Arizona sky. They reached a small rise overlooking the ranch, where Gabe had placed a simple wooden bench. They sat, the view of the valley spreading before them, mountains purpling in the distance. "I come here sometimes to think," Gabe said, breaking a comfortable silence. "It helps me remember why I chose this life." "It's beautiful," Tabitha murmured. "So vast and open. Different from Boston," Gabe observed. "Very different, but there's something honest about this landscape. It doesn't pretend to be anything other than what it is." Gabe turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "That's why I wanted to bring you here today, Tabitha. To be honest with you without pretense." Tabitha's heart quickened, but she remained silent, giving him space to continue. "These past weeks without you at the ranch, they've been empty somehow." Gabe's voice was low, his words carefully chosen. "I kept telling myself it was for the best, that you belong in town with people of education and culture, but the truth is I miss you. Every day." Tabitha swallowed hard, emotion rising in her throat. "I miss you too," she admitted softly, "more than I expected to. When I found you in that storm," Gabe continued, his eyes holding hers, "I was just trying to help someone in need. I didn't expect to." He paused, seeming to search for the right words. "I didn't expect to care for you the way I do." "And how is that?" Tabitha asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Gabe reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. His palm was calloused from ranch work, but his touch was gentle. "I love you, Tabitha. I know it's fast, and I know you have your teaching and your life in town now, but I needed you to know." The words hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned as the landscape surrounding them. Tabitha felt tears prick at her eyes, not from sadness, but from a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. "I love you too," she replied, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall. "I think I started falling in love with you those first days at the ranch, when you cared for me so gently, asked for nothing in return." The smile that broke across Gabe's face was like sunrise over the mountains, gradual, then brilliant. He raised his free hand to her cheek, his touch reverent. "May I kiss you, Tabitha?" In answer, she leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers with tender restraint, a first kiss that promised many more to come. When they parted, Tabitha felt as though something fundamental had shifted in her world, aligning her path more firmly with this man, this place. "What happens now?" she asked, remaining close to him, their hands still intertwined. "That depends on what you want," Gabe replied. "I won't ask you to give up teaching. I know how much it means to you, how good you are at it." Tabitha considered this. "The school is in town and your ranch is here. It's not an impossible distance." "No," Gabe agreed, "not impossible at all, and there are other possibilities if you're open to them." "What sort of possibilities?" Gabe looked suddenly nervous, though he didn't release her hand. "I've been thinking about this a lot, Tabitha. About us, about the future. I know it's soon, too soon, maybe, but I want you to know where I stand." He took a deep breath, then continued. "I want to court you properly, and if in time you feel as I do, I want to make a life with you, here at the ranch if you're willing, or wherever you want to be." The sincerity in his voice moved Tabitha deeply. "Are you asking to marry me, Gabriel Owens?" she asked softly. "Not yet," he replied with a small smile. That would be too forward, even for a rough cowboy like me, but I am asking if I may hope for that someday. Tabitha squeezed his hand, her heart full. Yes, she said simply. You may hope for that, I do. The kiss they shared then was deeper, sealed with the promise of a future together. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Tabitha Calloway knew with absolute certainty that the hailstorm that had seemed like the end of her hopes had, in fact, been the beginning of something beautiful. The courtship of Tabitha Calloway and Gabriel Owens became the talk of Chloride over the following months. Gabe made regular appearances at Sunday services, something the townsfolk noted had rarely happened before Tabitha's arrival. For her part, Tabitha continued her teaching duties with enthusiasm while spending weekends at the ranch, chaperoned by the ever-present Rusty and occasionally by Miguel, who seemed to take genuine pleasure in the developing relationship. As autumn deepened into winter, Tabitha's position in the community solidified. She organized a Christmas pageant for the school that drew the entire town, established a small lending library using books donated by residents, and even began evening classes for adults who wished to improve their reading and arithmetic skills. Through it all, Gabe supported her endeavors with quiet pride, often volunteering his time to repair school furniture or construct bookshelves for the nascent library. The townsfolk who had initially been suspicious of the Eastern teacher gradually came to respect and even admire the couple Tabitha for her dedication to education and community improvement, and Gabe for the subtle changes they observed in him as he emerged from his self-imposed isolation. On a crisp February evening in 1877, 6 months after Tabitha's arrival in Chloride, Gabe appeared at the boarding house dressed in his Sunday best, carrying a small wooden box. "Would you care to join me for a ride?" he asked Tabitha, who had just finished her evening meal. "There's something I'd like to show you at the ranch." Mrs. Fletcher, who had abandoned all pretense of not eavesdropping on their conversations, practically pushed Tabitha out the door, her eyes twinkling with knowing delight. The ride to the ranch was quiet, Tabitha sensing that Gabe had something important on his mind but content to wait until he was ready to share it. When they arrived, rather than stopping at the cabin, Gabe continued past it to a clearing she hadn't visited before. As they rounded a stand of juniper trees, Tabitha gasped at the sight before her. A foundation had been laid for what appeared to be a substantial house, with corner posts already in place marking its dimensions. Lanterns had been hung from the posts, illuminating the space with a warm, golden glow in the gathering dusk. "Gabe, what is this?" Tabitha asked as he helped her down from the wagon. "Our future," he replied simply, taking her hand and leading her into the outlined structure. "If you want it to be." He guided her through what would clearly be rooms, a large central living area, several smaller rooms to one side, a kitchen space. "Here," he said, gesturing to a particularly spacious corner. "I thought you might like a proper library, with big windows for the morning light." Tabitha's heart swelled as she realized what this represented: not just a house, but a vision for their life together, one that included space for her books, her passions. "And this," Gabe continued, pointing to another area, "could be a schoolroom. For our children, of course, but also for any students who live too far from town to attend regularly." "Our children," Tabitha echoed softly, emotion catching in her voice. Gabe turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "I promise to court you properly, to give us time. It's been 6 months, Tabitha, and every day my love for you has only grown stronger." He reached into his pocket and withdrew the small wooden box he'd been carrying. "I made this for you." Tabitha opened it to find a ring, not a traditional diamond, but a band of silver inlaid with a small piece of polished turquoise. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's not fancy," Gabe said, suddenly uncertain. "I know ladies back east expect diamonds, but this turquoise came from the mountains we can see from our bench. I wanted something that represented this place, our home." "It's perfect," Tabitha assured him, tears of joy springing to her eyes. "Absolutely perfect." Gabe took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee, still holding her hand. "Tabitha Calloway, I love you more than I ever thought possible. Would you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Through her tears, Tabitha smiled radiantly. "Yes, Gabriel Owens, with all my heart, yes." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, as if it had been made for her alone, which, of course, it had. As Gabe rose to his feet and pulled her into his arms, Tabitha felt a profound sense of rightness, of belonging. Their kiss was a promise, a covenant for the future they would build together. "When?" she asked as they finally parted, though remaining in each other's embrace. "The house won't be finished until late spring," Gabe replied, "but we could marry sooner if you wish. You could stay in town until the house is ready, or—" He hesitated. "Or," Tabitha prompted. "Or you could move into the cabin with me as soon as we're married," Gabe finished. "It's small, but it's home," Tabitha completed for him. "It's where I found you, where I began to love you." Gabe's smile was tender. "So it is." They decided on an April wedding, giving Tabitha time to write to her few remaining relatives in Boston and Gabe time to make the cabin more suitable for a wife. The announcement of their engagement was met with enthusiastic approval from the community, particularly from Tabitha's students, who immediately began planning ways to participate in the celebration. The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Construction on the new house progressed steadily, with Miguel and several men from town volunteering their assistance. Tabitha continued her teaching duties while also preparing for her new role as Mrs. Owens. One unexpected development came in March, when a letter arrived for Gabe from California. It was from his brother Jack, responding to a letter Gabe had sent months earlier telling him about Tabitha. Jack wrote that he had finally found success in a small gold mining operation and was coming to visit in June, eager to meet his new sister-in-law. "He'll stay in the cabin when he visits," Gabe told Tabitha as they discussed the letter. "By then, we should be settled in the new house." "I'm looking forward to meeting him," Tabitha said sincerely. "He's your only family." Gabe's expression softened as he took her hand. "Not anymore," he reminded her. "You're my family now, Tabitha. You and whatever future we build together." The wedding day dawned clear and mild, with wildflowers blooming across the desert landscape as if nature itself wished to celebrate their union. The ceremony took place in Chloride's small church, filled to capacity with townsfolk, ranch hands, and even a few travelers who happened to be passing through. Tabitha wore a dress of ivory silk ordered from San Francisco, with a veil of delicate lace that had belonged to her mother. As she walked down the aisle on the arm of Dr. Wilson, who had agreed to give her away in the absence of her father, her eyes remained fixed on Gabe, standing tall and proud at the altar. The vows they exchanged were traditional, but spoken with such evident sincerity that many in attendance found themselves wiping away tears. When Reverend Henderson pronounced them husband and wife, the cheer that erupted seemed to shake the very rafters of the small church. The celebration continued at the schoolhouse, transformed for the occasion with flowers, ribbons, and tables laden with food contributed by nearly every household in town. There was dancing, laughter, and numerous toasts to the health and happiness of the new Mr. and Mrs. Owens. As evening approached, Gabe and Tabitha took their leave, accompanied by the traditional teasing and well wishes of their friends. They rode to the ranch in the wagon, which Tabitha's students had decorated with flowers and ribbons, Rusty running alongside, seemingly aware that this was a special day. At the cabin door, Gabe surprised his new wife by sweeping her into his arms to carry her across the threshold. Inside, Tabitha found the humble space transformed. Fresh curtains hung at the windows, new bedding adorned the bed, and vases of wildflowers stood on every available surface. "Miguel's doing," Gabe explained, setting her gently on her feet. "He said a bride deserves flowers on her wedding night." "It's lovely," Tabitha murmured, touched by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. They stood for a moment in the center of the cabin, suddenly shy despite the months of courtship. Then Gabe stepped forward, taking her hands in his. "I never thought I'd find someone like you," he said softly. "Never thought I'd be this happy." "Nor I," Tabitha replied, her heart full to bursting. "When I came west, I was just looking for a position, a way to support myself. I never imagined I'd find love, a home, a future so bright. I promise to do everything in my power to make that future as bright as you deserve," Gabe vowed, drawing her closer. "To be the husband you deserve." "And I promise the same," Tabitha whispered against his lips. "To build our life together day by day, year by year." Their kiss sealed these new, private vows, a beginning to the intimate side of their relationship that had awaited this moment, this commitment. As the last light faded from the sky, they discovered each other anew, their union now complete in every sense. In the weeks that followed, Tabitha and Gabe settled into married life with surprising ease. Tabitha continued teaching, riding to town each morning and returning to the ranch each afternoon. Gabe adjusted his ranch routines to coordinate with her schedule when possible, often riding part of the way with her in the mornings or meeting her in the afternoon to accompany her home. The new house progressed rapidly, with Gabe working on it whenever he could spare time from ranch duties. Tabitha's input was sought and valued for every decision, from the placement of windows to the design of the kitchen. In June, as promised, Jack Owens arrived from California. He proved to be as charming as Gabe was steady, with the same dark hair but a leaner build and more restless energy. He embraced Tabitha as a sister immediately, declaring his brother the luckiest man in the territory. "You've changed him," Jack told Tabitha one evening as they sat on the porch of the cabin, watching Gabe work with a young horse in the corral. "He was always the responsible one, even as a boy, but there was a darkness in him after the war. Something closed off. You've opened him up again." "He's done the same for me," Tabitha replied, her gaze following her husband's movements with undisguised affection. "I was adrift, Jack. Lost after my parents died. Gabe gave me more than shelter from a storm, he gave me a place to belong." Jack's visit extended from the planned 2 weeks to a full month, during which he threw himself into helping complete the new house. His expertise with tools gained during years of constructing mining equipment proved invaluable, and the project advanced more quickly with his assistance. By late July, the house was sufficiently complete for Gabe and Tabitha to move in, though some finishing work remained. The transition from the cozy cabin to the spacious new home was emotional for both of them, a tangible symbol of their future together. The house was designed with both beauty and practicality in mind. Large windows captured views of the mountains and allowed natural light to flood the rooms. The promised library corner in the main living area boasted floor-to-ceiling shelves, already beginning to fill with books ordered from catalogs or purchased during occasional trips to larger towns. The kitchen was equipped with the best stove Gabe could obtain, knowing how much Tabitha enjoyed cooking. Most special to Tabitha was the room Gabe had designated as a classroom, a bright, airy space with a large blackboard mounted on one wall and sturdy tables and chairs he had crafted himself. Though they had no children of their own yet, several ranch families had already inquired about sending their children to Mrs. Owens's ranch school once or twice a week to supplement their education. As summer gave way to autumn, life settled into a rhythm that suited them both. Tabitha divided her time between teaching in town, establishing her small ranch school for outlying families, and creating a warm and loving home with Gabe. For his part, Gabe's ranch prospered under his careful management, allowing him to hire additional hands and spend more time working alongside his wife on their shared vision for the future. It was on their first anniversary, as they sat on their special bench overlooking the ranch, that Tabitha shared the news she had suspected for several weeks. "I have a gift for you," she said, placing Gabe's hand gently on her still flat stomach. Though it won't arrive for about 7 more months, the wonder that spread across Gabe's face was something Tabitha knew she would remember all her days. "A baby," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "We're having a baby," Tabitha nodded, her own eyes filling with happy tears. "Dr. Wilson confirmed it yesterday. He says everything appears healthy." Gabe gathered her carefully into his arms as if she had suddenly become fragile, precious glass. "I love you," he murmured into her hair. "I love you so much, Tabitha." The months of pregnancy brought changes to their routine, but only deepened their bond. Gabe became protective, insisting on accompanying Tabitha to and from town each day once her condition became more apparent. The school board, upon learning of her pregnancy, hired an assistant teacher to help with the more strenuous aspects of managing the classroom. In the evenings, they would often sit by the fire in their new home, Gabe reading aloud from one of their books while Tabitha sewed tiny garments for the coming child. They discussed names, made plans for the nursery, and dreamed of the future their family would share. The baby, a boy they named Thomas James Owens, arrived on a bright April morning in 1878, almost exactly 2 years after Tabitha had been cast out into the hailstorm that had led her to Gabe. He was healthy and strong, with a shock of dark hair like his father's and eyes that promised to be as green as his mother's. "He's perfect," Gabe whispered as he held his son for the first time, awe and love mingling in his expression. "Absolutely perfect." Tabitha, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband cradle their child with such tender care. "He's the beginning of our family," she said softly. "The future we're building together." The years that followed brought both joys and challenges. Thomas was joined by a sister, Elizabeth, in 1880, and another son, William, in 1883. The ranch prospered, allowing Gabe to purchase additional land and expand his operations. Tabitha's ranch school grew in reputation, eventually requiring the construction of a proper schoolhouse on their property, where she taught not only their own children, but those from surrounding ranches and farms. Chloride itself continued to develop, weathering the boom and bust cycles common to mining towns with greater stability than many similar settlements. The Owens family was instrumental in this growth, with Gabe serving on various town committees and Tabitha remaining involved in educational initiatives, even after she stopped teaching formally, to focus on raising their children. In the summer of 1891, 15 years after the hailstorm that had brought them together, Gabe and Tabitha hosted a celebration at their ranch. The occasion was the engagement of Miguel Vega, now Gabe's foreman and partner in several ventures, to Sophia Diaz, Mrs. Diaz's daughter, who had been one of Tabitha's first students. As they watched the young couple dancing beneath lanterns strung in the yard, Tabitha leaned against her husband's shoulder. You ever think about how differently our lives might have turned out? She asked softly. If you hadn't ridden out during that storm, if you had taken a different route. Gabe's arm tightened around her waist. I've thought about it, he admitted. But I prefer to believe it wasn't chance, Tabitha. I believe I was meant to find you that night. Tabitha smiled, turning her face up to his. The years had added a few lines around his eyes, a touch of silver at his temples, but to her, he was as handsome as the day he had proposed in the lantern-lit outline of their future home. I believe that too, she said. Of all the turns my life has taken, being thrown out in that hailstorm was perhaps the most fortunate, because it led me to you. Gabe bent to kiss her, a gesture still filled with love after all their years together. To think I once believed this land had nothing left to offer me, he murmured. Then it gave me you, and everything changed. As they rejoined the celebration, their children now almost grown, their home filled with friends and neighbors, their ranch thriving, Tabitha Calloway Owens reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the terror of that stormy night to the security and joy of the life she and Gabe had built together, every step had been worth taking. The bruises from that hailstorm had long since healed, but the love that had begun with a cowboy's act of kindness continued to flourish, strong and enduring as the land itself.